treatment effect. So after accounting for all of the latent constructs, what can we say about the true impact of, in this case, transplanting a random household from a lowest density neighborhood to the highest density neighborhood? Okay. What will it do? And we were able to determine that using the model that we developed versus another model where we didn't have essentially the latent constructs, or rather, to be precise, we didn't have the latent constructs including stochasticity. Remember, it's because we have a stochastic latent constructs that we create a jointness in our terms. Okay. So if you don't have that, essentially you would have a corrupted impact. Okay. And so what this slide shows is, if I did not consider the jointness, then according to the results, if I transplanted 100 households randomly picked from a lowest density neighborhood to the highest density neighborhood, the number of vehicles would go down by 34. Okay, that's what a minus 0.34 means. While according to our model, it will be much lesser than that. It will be in the order of about 14. So the basic idea is these estimates are closer to the truth than these estimates, okay, are more causal impacts. And you can see that permeate through in other ways too. So vehicle ownership is obviously one of those, but also when you look at the possibility of having more activity, for example, recreation, once again, the simpler model basically overestimates in this case how much more activity will be generated for recreation. And the point in all of these things empirically is also a lot of the earlier studies in this area have focused on impact of land use, residential density or whatever, on travel, on trips, on vehicle miles of travel. While our positioning of this is, the whole area of travel is moving toward an activity-based modeling system where we focus first on activities and activity participation. So we want to first understand the impact of land use changes on activities, the duration and participation in activities, and then everything else is downstream from it. So just to give you a sense of how the model that we developed, which includes the MDC, can be actually useful for policy conclusions. I'm just going to leave that here. We certainly do hope that we believe it's a very elegant way of trying different types of variables, and we hope it will open more doors in exploration of nexus between land use. So let me stop there, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Certainly we'll take a question or a comment or two.
May I ask a clarification question? I didn't quite understand what you said. The Gilbert motherhood, dramatological literature is actually
Drama.
drama. Oh,
Drama.
okay.
Dramaturgical.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that was this one.
Yes, please. Yeah, I see what
He has.
Yeah. So, yeah, and of course we have our YouTube channel, and so the entire presentation will be on our Georgia Tech NCTSPM YouTube channel.
And I'm glad he didn't mention it before I started my
Chandra, nice presentation. One of the things that you mentioned that I know myself when I start estimating these large models is that the identification problems or issues you receive can suddenly extend your analysis time by 3 months. So as you get into these complex models, I'm curious if you're seeing certain patterns of where identification issues are popping up. Like how are you detecting it, strategies that you've overcome to look at it? Because I'm also assuming, just as for context, how long does one of these models take to run? So you probably don't want to wait till the end.
Pat might want to add to this. The whole notion of, and that's a huge debate in the economics literature today. Okay? I firmly am on one side of it, so I'm clearly a biased I have a biased perspective. You know, you have to go back to theory. You have to go back to structure in terms of concepts, in terms of intuition, in terms of basic economic models, really to drive what at the end is going to impact what. So in the context of trying to simplify some, but trying to get traction from the literature, from theory, to have impacts in one direction versus the other is something very important. So for example, in this case, after you allow for the latent constructs,
Right.
you cannot have the outcomes, non-continuous outcomes, you cannot have them impacting each other jointly. It's just an identification problem. It has to be only in one direction, in a recursive direction, right? So technically, you can try all kinds of recursive directions and see what's the best data fit. Or you can go into theory and intuition and say, you know what, yes, I can do all of that, but I'm going to retain specific directionalities of impacts. So I think when you go to these models, these kinds of models perhaps open doors to new thoughts and new perspectives, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's a two-way street. You have to base things from a structural standpoint, and in economics, the debate is experimental economics versus, I think, what they call structural economics. I'm not sure, but that is always. So the short answer is you have to make some decisions.
Okay, so and to clarify then, when you say identification, you're thinking theoretical identification, structure of the model, not that you're encountering empirical identification when you go and you run this thing.
Oh, basically, you cannot estimate some of the structures of the models even if you wanted to, even if you had huge amount of data. You have to place some a priori thoughts and ideas. You can keep trying 500 versions of this model to try to come up with what you believe is the best based on data fit. But I think it always helps when you go back to basics.
All right, on that note, I think we'll conclude. So again, join me